Wait, there's a ladder there. Lewis, go back this way a little bit. You won't get caught. There's a camera there. Shit. Run! He's coming!
It was in the final hour of May the 29th, 2021, that a YouTuber named Displace was out on an adventure with one of his friends. You see, Lewis was the kind of guy who loved a bit of adrenaline and being in the spotlight while doing it. However, he didn't like to make these sorts of videos alone. So, when he received a request from one of his fans to join him on these adventures, well, let's just say it didn't end well for either of them. Quite honestly, this story is absolutely wild and has so many twists and turns, and is only one of 3 today. And so on that note, welcome back to Coffeehouse Crime, folks. My name is Adrian, and today we're looking at 3 stories involving YouTubers, TikTokers, and influencers. And while some of those are actually victims, there are others that are guilty. Before we begin, if you like true crime, strange, or chilling stories, then please do consider subscribing, and stick around until the end of the video to tell me what you think about this format. And now, with that said, please grab yourself a coffee, and let's caffeinate while we investigate. It was shortly after 11:30 PM on May the 29th, 2021 that 18-year-old YouTuber Mark Williams was on his way home from Maresfield, a small village found deep in the countryside of England. Now, having a few friends who actually live near Maresfield and Uckfield, I can vouch by saying that, although it is beautiful, there is barely anything to do around there. It was on this night that Mark agreed to go out drinking with one of his friends, Lewis. And although they'd only been friends for a short while, this had become quite the regular thing. After agreeing to meet in the nearby woods for a drink or a few, Mark then called his aunt, Emma, to let her know that he was now on his way back home. Now, Mark did sound quite drunk, which was actually out of the ordinary for him. But nevertheless, he was now on his way back home and hopefully would be safe soon. Being with his friend, Lewis told Emma not to worry about her nephew and that he would make sure that he would get back home in one piece. It had been a long day for Mark after all, and these drinks were sure to tire him out, so I'm sure that he was looking forward to getting back home and into his bed. But the problem is, Mark would never actually make it back. In fact, neither would Lewis. Growing up in the neighbouring town of Uckfield, Mark was your typical teenage boy. He loved gaming and Call of Duty, tolerated school, and had somewhat of a rebellious side too. Now, Mark and his brother both loved their parents, but with their aunt Emma living nearby, they would often stay with her on the weekends. It is worth saying that Uckfield is not one of those places where something new happens every week. You don't have access to malls and social clubs or anything like that, and so many teenagers find themselves bored out of their minds. Of course, Mark was no different, and in order to replace the mundane evenings and weekends, he would often lean on inspiration from some of the YouTubers that he used to watch in the urbex space. For those of you who don't know what urbex or urban exploration is, it is a term that is often used to describe visiting abandoned or prohibited places. Admittedly dabbling in this hobby myself when I was younger, urbex is a great way of experiencing liminal or decaying spaces, adrenaline that you seldom find as a teenager. It was after learning about urbex that Mark and his brother decided to create their first YouTube channel together, which they initially called Rooftop Legends. This was where they began uploading their own urbex or parkour videos, often with a twist, which sadly would involve escaping from security guards and even the police. In these videos, you can see them breaking into construction sites, public buildings, and even football stadiums. And while many of these videos were eventually taken down for quite obvious reasons, some of their earlier content from as far back as May of 2018 can still be found. From an outside perspective, what they were doing did have apparent risks. I mean, you don't simply walk all over rusty barbed wire without potentially catching tetanus. And that aside, what they were doing was not really acceptable, and the behavior that they exhibited was leaning on the antisocial side of things. However, the leading concern for officers here was not over theft or damage, but simply for Mark's well-being. By the year 2019, Mark's brother had decided to leave urbex behind for good and instead focus on more constructive things going on in his life. You see, he wanted to become a police officer, so this was not really the best look for it. But his older brother, Mark, was not finished with the idea yet, and so instead, he took the opportunity to rebrand and then relaunch under a brand new name. And so, Displace was born. Displace, or Displace3469, was likely his own way of starting fresh, and throughout the year of 2020, he continued to upload videos now under the new parkour or freerunning space. But throughout this year, which of course included COVID, he would start posting less frequently. And although there were initially no other clear explanations as to why he stopped posting so often, he would use his time in the spotlight to talk about his own experiences with freerunning, and also why he enjoyed doing it so much. It was on November the 1st of 2020 when Mark finally gave an update, posting a video titled "Displace is returning" to his YouTube channel. It was in this video that he explained that he was trying to follow in his younger brother's footsteps and had been attempting to become a police community support officer ever since leaving school.
You're kidding me. Bit of lag, but you know, that's normal. Anyway, the update is I've been doing some talking with Lewis. He's seeming like he wants to get back into climbing and stuff. I haven't actually done it since Christmas. I am not sure where my channel is going to go. I don't know if I'm going to keep doing these videos. I don't know if I'm going to be doing different videos or whether I'm going to stop completely. At this point in time, I don't know. I've been trained to get my SIA license over the past couple of weeks, and I can't really risk that, but I'm not sure at the moment. I need to talk with Lewis some more, work something out. You know, I can keep doing this. I mean, Ali Law still does it. He's in his 20s. He's doing good for himself. You know, good for him. But I'm hardly an athlete. I'm hardly a pro at this kind of thing.
Now, although it is unclear why he was ultimately rejected, I do have the sneaky feeling that maybe it was because the police officers, who were ultimately responsible for recruiting him, decided it wasn't a good idea to hire someone who, you know, recently broke into several places. I mean, it kind of feels like that's the exact opposite of what they're looking for, right? Either way, he then goes on to say in this video that he's now ready to come back to YouTube with a new phone, a better camera, and a bigger ambition than ever before. It also appears that Mark was weighing up the idea of possibly making a living just simply by making videos on YouTube, which is great, and usually I'd say all the more power to you. But is being a mild nuisance and breaking into properties really what you'd like to be known for?
Alright guys, don't know if you can see me or not, but I promise you Displace is coming back. I'm getting a new action cam. And I'm going to hit some serious videos, not like the shit ones I used to do before, I mean proper ones. I'm just getting myself back in shape again, especially during the night as well. No one can see me up here.
Only 2 weeks later, on November the 14th, 2020, Mark decided to introduce a new teammate to his YouTube channel, that being a young man named Lewis Ashdown. So, what can I say about Lewis? Well, he was a new friend of Mark's. Originally a fan who simply watched his videos on his YouTube channel, he wanted to get involved with the Urbex. And so Mark, who quite clearly was quite lonely at the time, jumped at the opportunity to have someone to make content with. You see, it is quite obvious through his live streams that Mark was still upset with his brother for ditching him and the channel. And, well, of course, he missed the company. In fact, he missed company in general, because Mark was a very lonely person. He wanted friends, and, well, Lewis, he was there to fill that void. Compatibility aside, it was quite evident that Mark still had some work to do in establishing boundaries between him and his supposed friends. You see, loneliness caused him to let the wrong kind of people into his life, which, sadly, is something that we all need to learn how to filter. But Lewis, well, at least at the time, he seemed like a trustworthy person. So why not? Things like that take a long time to conclude, and although their schools and friend groups never seemed to overlap, he wasn't an unfamiliar name either. Much like Mark, Lewis left school after college to do his own thing. And in the same way that Mark intended to be a community support police officer, Lewis was also trying to find his own way in life by becoming a chef. Over the next few videos, Mark would host Lewis as the two of them would explore several areas together, including water treatment facilities, town rooftops, hotels, and construction sites. Throughout this time frame, you can tell that Mark did actually have doubts about his own channel. He seemed to be upset about consistently getting caught, and he also seemed to have aspirations to move out and live with his girlfriend.
I've got my life to get in order. Me and my special someone are going to try and start a life together. It's going to be a bit hard. You know, I've got all money, and really, I need to get my hands on 100 grand, and there's no way I can do that very easily. I'm not certain about this channel's future. I really hope this is not another episode where my channel disappears, and then maybe I start a new one up in a few months' time. I really hope it's not like that. I'm going to do my best. I'm really sorry, guys. I'm a mess. This country is a mess. It was a stretch just for me and my brother to get down to Eastbourne. Lewis was supposed to be coming with us, but that messed up. He's got stuff to do of his own. No hate on him. He's busy. He's got work. Merry Christmas, guys.
Whether you like his content or not, Mark and Lewis did seem to be frustrating a lot of people with their videos. There were security guards, chefs, concierges, you name it, and sneaking around facilities and buildings which posed a threat to their safety was not something that anyone particularly appreciated. Despite seeing awkward moments of conflict between the two, including a part where they were talking about alcohol, it was evident that they both enjoyed each other's company, at least for the most part, bonding over moments of adrenaline and running away from officers.
Camera. Shit. Run. He's coming.
But sadly, despite their fun, this video is one of the last ever made by Mark. With the lockdown still looming, barely any cash and not many friends, Mark was understandably in quite a hard part of his life, which is probably why he agreed to go out and meet Lewis in the woods for a few drinks. Lewis promised to help distract him from the many things stressing him out, and with this being only a half-hour walk away, Mark really didn't have anything to lose, so he agreed. It was only after Mark arrived with his little brother that Lewis said he was no longer comfortable with the situation, and so a short while later, and with a bit of persuasion, he was dropped. And so, later that evening, Lewis and Mark met in Fairwarp Field, with Lewis quite notably filled to the brim with alcohol. I'm not just talking about a little bit here, I'm talking several bottles of beer, Jack Daniels, whiskey, Coca-Cola, you name it. And what's worse, Lewis seemed to be forcing him to drink. When Mark told him that he was now beginning to feel quite drunk, Lewis said okay and promised that he was now only giving him soda, when in reality, it was still very strong drinks. Now, we've all been there before, I'm sure, but Mark, he had a curfew to follow, and so at 11:30, he called his aunt to say that he was now on his way back home, with Lewis chiming in to say that he would get back safely. However, as you know, that would never happen, because shortly after, the two boys, they disappeared. Notifying the police that their son was now missing, police officers got to work on trying to find Mark the following morning. And their challenge would only seem to amplify when they realized that his good friend Lewis also failed to make it home too. As a result, all officers in the area were informed to be on the lookout for both of these young men. But sadly, nobody had seen them, and as Sunday grew long in the tooth, the investigators began to worry. Over the next several hours, not one single sighting had been made. However, by sunset, several citizens had come forward to claim that they had actually seen Lewis in a nearby pub. So, were Mark and Lewis running away and simply trying to evade the police? I mean, they were well known for trying to avoid officers, so maybe? While the police continued to look for both Lewis and Mark in the local pubs and restaurants around town, search crews were hard at work in the countryside looking at all of the surrounding lakes and woodlands. However, unknown to any of them at the time, one of them was continuing with his life as if nothing had happened. It was the following Monday, while all of this was still going on by the way, that Lewis then decided to meet up with his friend Liam to play some football and then go cinema. Now Liam, who by the way had no idea that his friend was actually reported as missing, thought nothing of Lewis's behaviour, which was noted to be completely normal. The two kicked around for a while until Lewis eventually asked Liam if maybe he would like to catch up the following evening. And with nothing on, he said sure. But this time, a bottle of Jack Daniels would sit neatly between the two, the whiskey burning their throats as they shared a drink together. Now, I'm sure that many of us understand and know this feeling, but the laughter and haze of alcohol just seems to make things a little bit easier to talk about, I'd say. But even still, Liam, he was not ready or prepared to hear what Lewis was just about to share. "I killed him," he confessed, almost casually. "The kid was annoying me." Liam froze, unsure if he had heard that correctly, but Lewis, he kept talking, kept offering more unwanted secrets, his words disturbingly clear despite not being desired. In the silent dark, he continued with his confession. "I took a knife with me. I wasn't sure at first, but in the moment, it just felt right. I wanted to do it. I felt good about it. Mark deserved to die. I thought about killing him before, and finally went through with it." Sadly, the worst was still yet to come. With a twisted grin, Lewis pulled out his phone, and then, one by one, he showed Liam several gruesome videos, with each one being more disturbing than the last. Liam could hardly breathe as he watched. Lewis was laughing as he showed his friend these videos, all of which lasted for longer than an hour. It was in that moment that Liam suddenly realized that he was hanging out and alone with a psychotic murderer. His body screamed at him to run and tell someone or anyone. However, for those agonizing moments, all he could do was just sit there, trapped in the horror. But no surprise, Liam escaped as soon as he had the opportunity to. In the meantime, police officers were already closing in on Lewis. They had since searched his home with an active search warrant, before then upgrading the missing persons case to be a potential homicide due to what they found inside. Looking around his bedroom, they found clothes covered in blood, which sadly would later be proven to belong to Mark. With the reported sightings of Lewis and bloody clothes found at his property, but no sightings of Mark himself, detectives then began to theorize that maybe he was actually the one responsible. And then, when Liam reported his discovery to the officers, well, they knew they needed to find Lewis. Thankfully, it would not take long for them to find him, because Lewis, well, he was actually at home waiting for them. And when asked what had happened, he simply replied with, "I wanted to kill him. I've wanted to for a long time." Shortly after his arrest, the body of Mark Williams was found in a nearby river. Search teams located a body in the woodland surrounding the Heron's Gill area, which would have only been a short walk from where the two boys drank together. Moving to the legal proceedings of this case, the court heard that Lewis would go on to stab Mark an extraordinary 107 times in the face, eyes, neck, head, back, genitals, chest, and right leg. And after he was done with his violence, he then pulled down Mark's trousers and then dumped his body in a stream before returning home. Lewis claimed that his actions were merely a matter of self-defense, and that, furthermore, he had only lashed out at Mark after he had tried to make sexual advances on him. However, the court did not buy his story, and ultimately, he pleaded guilty to murder and possessing an offensive weapon, in the end receiving 27 years for his crimes. The judge declared it to be one of the most savage, sustained, and merciless murders that the court had ever dealt with, and it's quite obvious that she was just as furious as the rest of the people in the courtroom. Deeming Mark as a valuable member of society who wanted to live life full of interest and to service others, she then went on to recognize the immeasurable pain felt by his family. Following his death, they said, "Mark touched the hearts of so many people and made their lives brighter with his loving, caring, and thoughtful actions. We are feeling his loss every second, and that will never change. Our hearts are broken." I think the terrifying thing about this case is that Lewis's chilling confession made it very obvious that he was actually planning to murder Mark for quite some time. But with the two knowing each other for only a couple of months before he died, it does make you wonder if maybe Lewis had been planning this before the two had even met at all. Now, what this would mean is that Lewis had actually formed an evil parasocial relationship with this YouTuber and then committed to a friendship with him only so he could murder him. And what can I say? It just goes to show how careful you have to be, not only with the friendships that you choose, but the company too. I feel like taking advantage of a friend's trust and friendship is one thing, but it takes a true psychopath to choose violence, murder, and then film it all on your phone. Now, our next case is slightly different to this one, involving both a YouTuber and a TikToker, and I think it's best I just tell you the story instead of create any spoilers. And so, on that note, here's the story of Mr. Prada. The date was September the 29th, 2024, when officers received a phone call from a concerned citizen driving along Highway 51. While driving along this road, they noticed a suspicious rolled-up tarp on the side of the highway between the villages of Fluka and Tangipahoa. For context, both of these villages are around 60 miles northeast of Baton Rouge. It is an isolated area, with most of the traffic opting to take Route 55 instead of this small road. A place where others were unlikely to see anyone dump a body because hardly anyone would be around. Responding deputies approached the tarp with caution, unwrapping it to find the corpse of a white male inside. And although he was not identifiable at first, an autopsy would later help clear up a few of these questions. To begin with, the preliminary cause of death was ruled to be a homicide, and that's because the man had appeared to have been badly beaten, with the manner of death ultimately deemed to be blunt force trauma. Soon enough, the victim was identified to be 69-year-old William Nicholas Abraham, who lived roughly an hour away in Baton Rouge. However, the more that investigators looked into this case, the worse it became. For context, William Nicholas Abraham, better known as Nicky, was a life coach and a licensed professional counselor. He liked to be a motivational speaker, an author, and more. And with more than 30 years of experience in treating substance abuse, depression, and anxiety, he provided psychotherapy to all walks of life. In addition to this, he also offered group counseling and presentations to the public. He also treated a wide range of clients, including those suffering from PTSD, depression, and relational conflicts. Born on December the 28th, 1954 in Clarksdale, Mississippi, Nicky graduated from Clarksdale High School in 1972, before then receiving a Master's of Divinity in Theology at the Sacred Heart School of Theology. Moving forward, he obtained a PhD in counseling from Marquette University, and then also a business administration and management degree from Concordia International University. So it goes without saying that, no surprise, this man was quite the smart cookie. Nicky was also practical for his age, and would try to branch out of the typical paths of counseling through emerging technologies like YouTube, creating YouTube videos as far back as 2009, where, by all counts, even back then, he seemed to be a happy and friendly man.
Hello everybody, and hello Oprah. I have been waiting for years to get to you. I am sitting here thinking about when I sent you this CD, and I don't know if you've seen it yet, but I did this CD several years ago and I sent it to you. My name is Nicky Abraham, William Nicholas Abraham, but I go by Nicky. PhD, but who cares?
Several years down the road, Nicky would go on to attend a few interviews used in several episodes of Weekends with Whitney, where the host, Whitney Van, described him as one of her close friends. In these episodes, he discussed many things such as being in the here and now, time perspective, and defense mechanisms.
For the most part,
Okay.
sees an adversity or an obstacle as specific. It's my computer is the problem, not life.
Yeah, or me because I'm an idiot.
Or me because I'm an idiot. Right, it's the computer. The specific, that it's temporary, that it's going to pass. You know, the whole 12-step, this too shall pass. I mean, this is really simple thinking, but it's powerful thinking because we know it's going to pass.
And so, quite naturally, when his friends and family found out that he had been murdered, they were absolutely devastated to hear the news. I mean it when I say it, but Nicky was a genuinely loved man, with one of his friends describing him as a wonderful therapist who went that extra step for his clients and truly cared about his religion. However, before they could grieve or ask any further questions, new evidence caused the internet to suddenly erupt with speculation. It all began when police officers travelled to his home and his office to see if there were any clues or evidence as to who killed him or why. And that is when they noticed that his vehicle, a black Lincoln MKZ, was missing. The investigators did what any good officer would do in this situation and ran his license plates through the system. They then told all local police departments to be on the lookout for that vehicle. And that would prove to be extremely crucial, because only one day later, a police officer would recognize that black MKZ in the Baton Rouge area. The officer tried to initiate a traffic stop, but whoever was driving that vehicle was not wanting to play ball. Instead, they rammed the vehicle behind them, before then driving off and, unfortunately, successfully getting away. However, that would only be for a short while, because later that day, the driver accidentally crashed the vehicle. Now, thankfully, a public surveillance camera would capture several images of the driver, and with no idea who this driver was, the cops released these images to the public.
Investigators are now looking for this man in connection to the murder of that Baton Rouge therapist. The Tangelo Parish Sheriff's Office just released these surveillance videos just tonight.
They believe he was spotted driving the doctor's car this afternoon. Riley Kramer's been following these latest developments. Riley.
Here's another look at this person of interest. Investigators believe he was driving Dr. Nick Abraham's car in Baton Rouge. We're told he sped away from a traffic stop and crashed before running away. Dr. Nick Abraham was found dead, wrapped in a tarp along Highway 51 in Tangelo Parish. Investigators say they believe he was killed Saturday evening and his body was dumped on the roadway overnight. Now, investigators say they're looking for this man. They believe he was spotted driving the doctor's car before crashing it near this business off Sherwood Forest in Baton Rouge and running off.
And let me tell you, investigators were not prepared for what would happen next, because only several minutes later, the internet exploded with information. Because, as it turns out, that driver was actually a TikToker with more than 4 million followers. And so, enter 20-year-old Terrion Ishmael Thomas. Now, although his real name is Terrion, most people know him by the name of Mr. Prada, an eccentric content creator who found himself with quite the negative reputation. With over 4 million followers on his main account, Mr. Prada became infamous for his comedic and relatable videos, many of which he was accused of copying from other creators. He began gaining traction on TikTok in late 2022, making numerous accounts over the years due to several copyright violations. However, his current main account, Mr. Prada 456, at one point reached 4.1 million followers, which since then has declined to 3.9. Like I said, Mr. Prada became notorious on the platform for copying other creators' videos. But when I say copying, I mean literally shot for shot. Many of these creators who had their content copied by Mr. Prada would call him out for his lack of creativity. However, his unapologetic attitude towards their complaints quickly became the normal. It's kind of funny, but some people on TikTok would claim to be Mr. Prada victims, often feeling even worse when he would respond in a typical John Somali fashion, with arrogance, humor, and narcissism. In fact, he would even go as far to make a video saying he was not bothered by the criticism. Now, douchebag or not, no one deserves to have poor mental health, and over the past year, many of Mr. Prada's followers expressed concern over his well-being after he made several posts hinting at loneliness and even announcing that his name is not Prada anymore, because quite frankly, he no longer felt like himself. Things started to get slightly weird too, when he would go on to upload several videos of him shaving his head and even his eyebrows. There did seem to be many things going on behind the scenes, and he would do other things too. In one video he said, "Practicing for my mugshot because this might be the year someone's gonna meet God if they piss me off too much." He would also go on to say some ominously foreboding things like this.
Life is so ghetto, but at least I'm still skinny. Do not get into a relationship with anybody. All they're gonna do is lie and cheat and manipulate you and try to get in your head. How are you gonna manipulate the manipulator? I'm too smart for that. People problem these days is they be playing like they got issues. I really got issues.
Honestly, I could go on about Mr. Prada for a long time. With his TikTok and his YouTube channels still active, and him having a rabbit hole of a personality, there is a lot to digest here. But there are several very important things to note. For example, in one video, Mr. Prada confirmed to his audience that he was unfortunately suffering from bipolar. We don't know if this was type 1, type 2, or even type 3, known as cyclothymia. However, all come with their fair share of mood swings and unfortunate side effects.
I gotta find this shit. Oh, what's happened? Y'all asking what I got? I got bipolar. I'm bipolar. Yeah. Y'all never seen anybody that's bipolar before? See, I was trying to hide it, but it just slipped out. It slipped out. I don't give a fuck.
As many of you all know, bipolar is a mental health condition with extreme mood swings, including emotional highs known as mania and emotional lows known as depression. It's a long-term condition that can be extraordinarily disruptive to everyday life, not only for the person who has bipolar, but for all of their loved and close ones too. I think it's quite obvious to say that Mr. Prada was clearly going through a whole bunch of other things in his life too. And although I can't tell you what was causing his strange behavior online, because quite frankly, I'm not a psychologist, Nikki was. Do you see where this is going now? Anyway, bipolar disorder can cause impulsive decision making, which, given the accusations laid against Mr. Prada, was not a good thing for him right now. And unfortunate for him, thanks to TikTok, there was plenty of evidence that he was not in a good headspace for several months already. In one video, dated the 19th of March 2024, Mr. Prada then filmed himself cutting all of his hair off. In another video, he doubled down on his lack of empathy for other creators who he stole content from, further highlighting his lack of remorse, sympathy, or compassion towards other people. It is also noted that he really did seem to be running himself ragged too. I mean, with skin and hair like that, compared to only a few months prior, you can really see how unhealthy he was becoming. And I could post more, but I think you get the picture. Anyway, Mr. Prada eventually decided to make the move over to YouTube, and one of these videos would become very telling of what was about to happen. Although it does seem to be taken at an earlier date, it was on September the 28th, 2024 that he posted this video to his YouTube channel. And as uncomfortable as it may be to watch, I'm going to let it play for a few moments so you can get a good reflection of his mental state.
With you, I don't wanna be with. When I'm with you, I don't wanna be with you. I don't wanna be with. Get this shit off me.
And this date, September the 28th, 2024, was the same day that Nikki vanished. After reviewing the local surveillance footage, there were plenty of people who recognized Mr. Prada, of course that being his neighbors, and this made it very easy for police officers. With enough information to now suspect that Mr. Prada could actually be related to Nikki's death, they decided to bring him in for questioning. However, after arriving at his property, they realized that he was nowhere to be found. And so, after finally getting a search warrant to look at his house, they decided to break the front door down and see what they could find. And unfortunately, they were met with quite the horrific scene. While inside the property, officers found evidence of a violent physical altercation and a significant amount of blood. Not only that, but they would go on to find several unspecified weapons. As detectives began to ask around and see if anyone had seen their neighbor on the day of September the 28th, the ominous answer was yes. Witnesses allegedly saw Mr. Prada dragging an object wrapped in a blue-colored tarp into a black Lincoln MKZ, which was the same color and model owned by Nikki. So, now we have a bloody crime scene, a matching vehicle, and a matching tarp. All of a sudden, this was not looking good for Terrion. To make matters even worse, undisclosed surveillance footage also apparently shows Nicky arriving at Mr. Prada's apartment complex that very same morning. He was also seen to be wearing the same clothes that he was later found dead in. Although Terrion was initially nowhere to be found, that police crash would, of course, change everything. And ironically, one of those who witnessed the car crash would even take a video of Mr. Prada fleeing the crime scene, with only a couple frames of the back of his head confirming his identity. Terrion was found on October the 1st, 2024, where he was then arrested and flown back to Louisiana. On the day of Nicky's funeral of all days, actually. He was then charged with murder in the 2nd degree and the obstruction of justice. However, thankfully, he would later see that upgraded to murder in the 1st degree. And although he still actually awaits his trial, I'm going to say this is quite the slam dunk for prosecutors. By the way, if all of that wasn't enough already, the police would then later find more surveillance footage of Terrion inside Nicky's vehicle. But despite the mountain of evidence which is already available, prosecutors are being very careful with what they release to the public. For example, they still haven't actually specified if Terrion was a client of Nicky's. But considering what we already know, that Terrion has mental health issues, and that Nicky was also a trained psychologist in the area, I think we can connect the dots here. And let's be honest, Mr. Prada definitely needed one. It's very likely that Nicky was there simply to provide therapy. With more than 30 years of experience with people suffering from anxiety, PTSD, and depression, Terrion fit his profile quite perfectly. And with the way that he was behaving in the months, weeks, and days up to the attack, it is very plausible that he was manic, or even experiencing impulsive thoughts at the time. Actually, I'm not even sure you can call that impulsive, because only a few months prior, he had even joked about murdering someone on his TikTok. With Nicky arriving at his property, blood found at the property, neighbors witnessing Terrion drag a heavy tarp to the vehicle, and Nicky's body being found in the same type and color tarp a day later, well, yeah, I'm not seeing any alternate timeline here, other than the one that Terrion, well, he did it. He killed Nicky and tried to cover it up. But I guess that only time will tell. We just have to see how the trial goes. Nicky was one of 8 kids, and his heartbroken siblings have all opened up about their feelings following his tragic death. They remember him as a person who always wanted to help other people, and not the kind of man that something like this should have happened to. Facing 1st-degree murder in Louisiana, Terrion could receive the death penalty if he's unlucky. And just as a side note, the obstruction of justice also holds a maximum sentence of 40 years to fit that already hefty life sentence which is looming over his head. So with that said, good luck Terrion, you're gonna need it. Now, I think we need to address the elephant in the room here, but there were many signs that Terrion was mentally unwell, and there were hundreds of people that noticed this in the months leading up to the murder. I mean, all of his TikTok videos, which are still online to this day, are filled with comments asking if he's okay. All I can say is that mental health is extremely important here. Not to excuse his horrible actions, by the way, but there were many people which saw what was going on. I guess on the other side, there was no one who could directly help him on their own. So, what were they supposed to do in this situation? But there is one thing for certain here. There were many people which saw this man fall apart firsthand, before he then went on to murder an innocent victim. Now, this is just my own personal opinion here, but what do I think happened? I think he likely fell apart, had some sort of mental relapse, met Nicky as a client to therapy, and then murdered him in cold blood. And the result? We now have 2 people who have lost their lives. It is worth noting here that Nicky was apparently being investigated for inappropriately touching an 11-year-old in the year 2015. However, prosecutors refused to take this case to trial, and they also confirmed that this was not Terrion. That aside, I feel like this story has most of the information we're looking for, which is very different to our next case. Jennifer Sheffield was a bright and beautiful woman living in Brandon, Mississippi. She had a happy home, a prosperous career, an apparently perfect husband, and a very comfortable life ahead. So, when she suddenly fell silent, her family and friends knew that something bad must have happened. It is worth mentioning here that, unfortunately, she was going through a divorce at the time. However, she did make it very clear that her soon-to-be ex-husband was very supportive. And we know this because on December the 10th of 2024, she would go on to post this video on TikTok.
About to be a newly single mom, and I am in the middle of a divorce. My husband is being incredible though. Like, really and truly, like, we're working together. Everything's great. We're splitting everything down the middle. Like, you know, everything is good. It is a very civil divorce with our daughter in mind, and I really appreciate that. You know, I'm gonna be on my own, single income right now, and he will be helping with her. He will be supporting her, you know. So essentially, like, I'm really thankful for that, and that I will not have to worry so much about supporting her. However, I will be on a very limited income with buying a new house and, you know, paying a mortgage and all that stuff. I've never done this before. I've never been on my own before. So if you have any tips, saving money and making money, anything like that, like, I would really appreciate it. Like, you know, coffee at home, you know, I take caffeine pills, I do my own hair, nails, everything. Like, I do all that. So yeah, if you just have any tips, like, I would really appreciate it, because, like, I'm a little scared right now.
In this video, Jennifer described the upcoming challenges she faced not only through divorce, but also being a newly single mum. She also described that, despite moving on, the divorce with her husband Brandon was amicable. Nevertheless, you could tell through the smiles and calmness that she was also quite scared about her future, and that furthermore, she appreciated any tips from the TikTok community. So, a difficult challenge ahead, but that's okay because at least her husband was on board. The thing is, that would be the last video that she would ever post on TikTok, and only 2 weeks later, she vanished. So, who precisely was Jennifer Sheffield, and what happened? Born on September the 9th, 1994, to her mother Eileen and her father Gilbert, Jennifer grew up alongside her younger brother Austin, who, by the time they became adults, was much taller than she was. Jennifer was known to be a thoughtful and devoted daughter, wife, mother, and friend. So, when she randomly stopped responding to messages and phone calls, especially around a time like Christmas, well, let's just say that people quickly came to the decision that something wasn't right. While talking about her personality, friends describe Jennifer as a beautiful and radiant spirit who is also passionate about helping those around her. Moving into her education, Jennifer studied for a Bachelor of Science in Biochemistry, before then moving on to study for a Master of Science in Biology and Medical Science. So again, there is no doubt that she was extraordinarily bright and intelligent. She also enrolled in the Master of Medical Sciences at Mississippi College in the hopes of becoming a doctor. So, it does seem that her life was shaping up to be quite beautiful, and she was excited about her future too. To add to her loving demeanor, Jennifer had a deep love for God, travel, laughter, friends, family, and of course the finer things in life. But most of all, she absolutely adored her kids and her career. As a young woman in her 20s and 30s, Jennifer would often document her life on TikTok. With almost 10,000 followers, she had built up a small audience that appreciated her for her daily vlogs, motivational videos, and tips for passing med school.
Hi, and welcome to my chaotic life. So here I'm just studying a little bit before work at one of the coffee shops, like, right down the street. When I tell you I just kind of fit in studying anywhere I can, that's pretty much how it's been lately. This week we have a lot going on with my daughter's school ending, so she's got her band banquet, we gotta go get a dress, I've got the yard to cut, I've got some gardening to do, I have, like, my max hours that I can do at work, and I'm just kind of trying to do what I can here.
Jennifer found purpose, not only in improving the lives of others through her work, but also in improving the lives of students wanting to graduate from med school so that they too could support other people. She would also post videos of her getting ready for work, talking about her journey with God, doing tutorials on her hairstyles, and other things like gardening and making meals. Coming back to her recent TikTok video, we already know that Jennifer and Brandon had made the unfortunate decision to separate. Divorces can, of course, be extraordinarily difficult, but sometimes things are simply just not meant to be.
I have been hearing from God, and now that I'm feeling God's presence, it's like, bam, out of nowhere, just something happens. The devil is after me because I'm walking with God, I'm doing the best I can, and then, right? Like, please help. I know TikTok has all the answers to literally everything, so just words of encouragement, please.
What is really interesting here is that, despite not actually being the biological mother to either of Brandon's children, she agreed to one of them going with her so that she could be raised with a mum. Now, of course, this is a highly noble thing to do, although it likely did come with complexities. We don't quite know when Brandon and Jennifer got together, by the way. However, there are photos of the two which date as far back as the year 2017, meaning that they were in love or at least knew of each other for at least 7 years. Taking a quick look at Brandon, he was born on September the 22nd, 1984, and was 10 years older than she was. As we know, he also came with children from former partners, and just like everyone else, I'm sure he had his own baggage. But Jennifer, she didn't mind that. In fact, she embraced it. His children loved her, and they seemed happy, but clearly, things were not working out between the two adults. Now, Brandon was known as a family man. He loved working on cars, fishing, playing disc golf, going on vacations with his family, and was an avid fan of Alabama football, proudly embracing all things Alabama. Initially from Red Oak in Texas, Brandon decided to move to Brandon to be Brandon and live in Brandon, branding Brandon's population with another Brandon while he brandished his skills as a technician at a local engineering company. So, all jokes aside, when he too wasn't responding to any messages or phone calls, this only heightened their grave concern. It was on December the 28th that the authorities received a wellness request at the Sheffield residence. You see, Jennifer's family hadn't heard from her for the entire day prior, and with this being such a sentimental time of the year, they knew that something bad must have happened. I mean, there wasn't any other plausible reason. Well, that is when her family decided to go to the residence and see precisely what was up. And from the outset, they realized that something didn't seem right. And so, not to tamper with any possible evidence, that is when they called the authorities and asked them to come down as soon as possible. Arriving at the property at 7:19 that morning, officers found a horrifying scene almost immediately. All they had to do was open the front door and look down at the floor. Brandon and Jennifer had both been shot and, unfortunately, were dead. But judging by the positions of them on the floor, one of them had been murdered, while the other was self-inflicted.
Brandon police are investigating. According to investigators, the incident occurred in the 300 block of Tulin Street just after 7 Saturday morning. Chief Joseph French says family members were at the home conducting a welfare check on their daughter when they noticed obvious signs of foul play. French says the bodies are that of 40-year-old Brandon Shayfield and 30-year-old Jennifer Shayfield. NBI assisted with the crime scene, and this is an ongoing investigation.
Addressing the crowd waiting outside, Chief Joseph French said it appeared that Brandon had shot Jennifer and then himself. The pair were believed to be at home with their daughter at the time of the incident. However, thankfully, she was unharmed. Friends and family of the Sheffields were utterly horrified by the news. For many of them, Brandon's actions made absolutely no sense at all. In fact, both sides of the family categorically loved him, and all of Jennifer's friends only knew him as a loving person without any concerning signs. As quoted from one of their friends, "He has never been a violent person, and I've always loved him for how he loved her." So, it's definitely hard trying to understand something that we will never be able to. Now, this story is already enough to spark healthy conversations and debate. However, moving forward, there was a lot of controversy with how Jennifer's and Brandon's funerals were held, which only seemed to enrage people online, and for potentially valid reasons too. To begin with, many people were surprised when they learned that their funerals were actually held together in Brandon. Now, under normal, unfortunate circumstances where two partners die together, this, of course, would make sense. However, let's not forget that it does look incredibly likely that Brandon murdered his wife. So, on that basis, why are they sharing a service? To add to the pain, it was also pointed out on Twitter that Jennifer did not seem to have her own photo at their funeral. More so, she seemed to be a part of his life and without her own. It is very hard to know what either of the two families were thinking, but I'm sure that this at least made some sense through their grieving process. Just a side note here, but Brandon seemed to strongly support the Second Amendment, which, to be honest, I can't argue with. A lot of people do, but the problem I have here is how contradictory he was in one of his most recent Facebook posts. In one of his posts, he said, "I won't shoot you. My gun won't pull its own trigger. It can't just go off. However, rest assured that if a lunatic walks into a grocery store and then pulls out a rifle, I will draw my pistol and protect myself and my family. I would like to keep my right to choose to not be a helpless victim. There is evil in the world, and if evil has a gun, I want one too." 2 years later, he would then use that very gun against his own family. Now, of course, we don't quite know why the two were splitting up, so it wouldn't really be fair to speculate. However, it is clear that Jennifer and Brandon tried to keep their issues away from friends, family, and the public. And so, with that said, who knows what could have driven them apart. What we do know is that Jennifer was an incredible mum to Brandon's 2 daughters. Her Facebook is covered in not dozens, but hundreds of photos of her and his family. She invested all of her love, attention, effort, energy, and time into this family. And what did she receive in return? A bullet to the head and a shared funeral. Now, from what we do know, Jennifer seems to be handling this divorce rather well. She seemed to want to split everything down the middle, was being amicable about the situation, and even called Brandon incredible. But maybe this wasn't the same story for Brandon, who, at the time, might have felt like he was losing control of the situation. His family and friends all describe him as a genuinely nice guy, and, at least from what we know, he never seemed to be violent towards Jennifer or anyone else for that matter. But watching a partner move on can be genuinely soul-destroying, and maybe this is where his nice guy illusion suddenly shattered. Especially if he never learned how to deal with rejection in previous years. It is very possible that maybe he couldn't even begin to fathom life without Jennifer, the kids, or half the income. And if that was the case, then maybe he decided to take reality into his own hands, even if reality meant the death of his wife and himself. What makes this story so much harder to understand is how much Jennifer seemed to trust and appreciate Brandon in her videos. This wasn't a typical case where she seemed to be in distress. And so on that note, what precisely happened? Unfortunately, at least for now, nobody knows. And it just goes to show that you can never trust what people post on social media. Social media presents a carefully curated version of reality, often distorting our perceptions and setting unrealistic expectations. Platforms like Instagram and TikTok are filled with highly edited photos. You're also dealing with exaggerated lifestyles, highlight reels that rarely reflect the struggles behind the scenes, and often just outright lies. This constant exposure to perfection can often make people feel very inadequate, especially when they compare their everyday lives to an idealized, unattainable standard. But many people do forget that these images are filtered, staged, and even manipulated, leading to unrealistic comparisons and, of course, self-doubt. For example, we only have to go as far back as my recent video to see how Kelsey Turner, who portrayed herself as a Playboy model, was actually just a horrible leech. Kiana and Ronald Burns tried to look like millionaire masterminds and also a power couple, when in reality, they were broke and hated each other. And of course, then there's Daniel Johnson, who shouldn't have been on Twitter at all. So, the next time you're on social media and do begin to feel lousy, then I have a suggestion for you. Close the app, put the phone down, and focus on yourself. Just head out for a coffee, spend time with a loved one, or pick up that hobby you've always wanted to try. And please, believe in yourself, not that fake facade. From TikTokers to YouTubers and influencers to therapists, it seems that absolutely no one is safe from crime. And that's because, unfortunately, this is just the game of life. Wrapping up here, we've come to the end of this third story and the end of the video. And so, with that said, thank you so much for making it this far, folks. I really do appreciate you being here. And yeah, this was quite the long video, so on that note, what did you think of the format and these 3 stories? As always, please share your thoughts in the comments section down below. By the way, if you'd like to support me and the channel, then please do check out my Patreon here. Alternatively, you can follow me on social media here, most notably my Instagram. Anyway folks, once again, with the few changes made in this video, I would love to know your opinions, so please do share your thoughts down below. I genuinely appreciate it. And yeah, I think that's pretty much the end. Whew, that's a long recording. As always, I'll see you again very soon for another video. Until that moment arrives though, please do remember to look after yourselves, look after each other, and of course, as always, stay safe. Thank you, and goodbye.